Reading poetry is awesome.
Writing poetry is awesomer. Stick around to find out more about how to read poetry
And how to take your poetry writing from meh to magnificent. Jamaican writer and performer Jean Binta Breeze was the first woman dub poet. Dub poetry is an early form of Caribbean spoken word. Originating in Jamaica in the 1970s and 80s, it drew on reggae and dub music for its rhythmic structure and was set to reggae music beats. The poet would be like the DJ chanting in the dancehall. Jean Binta Breeze, like other dub poets, wrote about the trials of life as a poor black person, oppressed by economic and social systems that neither saw her nor considered her. Her most famous poem is called Rhythm Ravings, the Mad Woman's Poem. Its narrator is a schizophrenic mental patient who moves from the country to the city, where she is hospitalized time after time at Bellevue.
But when hungry make King Street pavement bubble and dolly in front of me eye, and my foot start wander fly to the garbage pan in at the Chinaman backlot. And then nearly chop off my hand in at the butcher shop to thief the piece of rotten pork. At that time, then grab me, and it's right back in at Bellevue, them carry me, so that's me mad again.
Through the mad woman's eyes, the reader or listener sees two versions of the world. An objective reality, where she's on a city street eating torn up newspaper, and the world of her delusions, where she's in the country eating soft, tender roast breadfruit and saltfish with coconut rundown on the side. Breadfruit, yum. Newspaper, not so much. Jean Binta Breeze died in 2021, but you can still find her dub poetry in recordings made all over the world. Every poet makes a choice about what kind of poetry they want to write. Think of dance. There's formal dance that you put on a stage, like the kind of dance done in a theater by a ballet or a modern dance troupe. There's also the kind of dance done in a pasa fete or on the street. Their form is different. The person who makes up a dance is its choreographer. Do you think the ballet choreographer intended the same thing as the pasa choreographer? Does the choreographer consider where the dance is performed, who his audience might be, or how much that audience cares about formal dance technique and the history of dance? Now, back to poetry. Poetry that's meant to be read aloud often has a different form than poetry that's meant to be read on page. Spoken word works with sound to capture a listener's attention and make the poem memorable. It emphasizes the use of some poetic devices like rhythm, rhyme, and repetition. Repetition and refrain. What's the difference? In Rhythm Ravings, the Mad Woman's Poem, Jean Binta Breeze repeats the idea that when she goes to the mental hospital Bellevue, the doctor and the landlord operate on her to take the radio, which represents her schizophrenic delusions, out of her head. Somewhere in every stanza, she mentions the doctor, the landlord, Bellevue, the radio, the DJ, or the rhythm. That's repetition. In the same poem, every stanza except the final one is followed by this refrain.
No feel no way. Town is a place that I really can't stay. Them coulda ribbit me hand, ribbit me toe. Me want go a country, go look a mango.
In poetry that is set to music, using a refrain makes the poem more like a song and gives the audience a hook to remember and chant along with the poet's performance. And now, Back to our regular programming.
In poetry meant to be read on the page, the poet can safely presume the reader will take time to understand the poem. The reader has the poem at hand to read it over and over and over. That's not something the spoken word poet presumes at all, ever. On the page, we see rhymes.
Bent double like old beggars under sacks. Knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge.
Dulce et decorum est is a poem by Wilfred Owen, an Englishman who fought in World War I. If you didn't know it before, when you read this poem, you understand that World War I was terrible. I mean, just awful. It was the first war to kill so many people. The last two lines give the whole statement that the title's taken from. It translates to, "It is sweet and fitting to die for one's country." That, the narrator says, is an old lie with a capital L. Why? In the poem, he gives examples of the horrific suffering soldiers went through in World War I. Before then, soldiers died in war, of course. There's always been war. But this war was the first to use tech like airplanes, tanks, and submarines. This was the first time the world saw long-range artillery, machine guns, and chemical warfare, gas attacks. The 5 nines at the end of the first stanza are gas shells dropping on them. Wilfred Owen's poem describes a mustard gas attack. The gas turns the air green, like the sea. Through his own protective gas helmet, the narrator watches another soldier who's too slow and doesn't get his helmet on in time. The gas causes the other soldier's lungs to fill with fluid, and he drowns on land. The gas burns exposed skin like fire. The sick thing is that the narrator has to watch him die and can't do anything to help him. That's why the last 2 lines say it's an old lie. If your country makes you die that horribly, it's neither sweet nor fitting. War comes in different kinds. Write a poem in any style about a war you know about, with the intention of persuading people not to fight. Include in your poem repetition, rhyme, and a refrain. Try it.